So now the one thing that I want to talk about is the tradability of these tokens. And this is where it gets really quite tricky. Now you can think of, and I'm going to talk about this in a way that you can issue a token in such a way that they only reach a particular investor base. But that makes it difficult then to have the transaction actually occur between investors in the particular investor base. So you have to find a way that retail investors cannot get their hands on your tokens. Now I can tell you that that's actually a pretty difficult problem to solve, because many of the services that exist on the blockchain are about so-called wrap tokens. So you may have issued your tokens, you may have restricted the number of people who can hold your token to what's referred to a whitelist. So this is the list of addresses of people who can hold these tokens and trade them. But it's possible that somebody creates a wrap token, so which is essentially is a substitute on that particular token that you have, and then allows the trading of that to anybody. So it's really difficult for an issuer to prevent retail investors to get their hands on their tokens. Now here's the position of the SEC on this one. Jay Clayton, at the time who was the chairman of the SEC, said basically, I believe every ICO I've seen is a security. ICOs are security offerings, we should regulate them like we regulate securities offering, end of story. So essentially he says, we're cracking down on these activities. In particular, he said, I've asked the SEC's Division of Enforcement to continue to police this area vigorously and recommend enforcement actions against those that conduct initial coin offerings in violation of federal securities law. So this is a big threat to the area. It's one of the reasons why we haven't seen many ICOs actually happening after 2018. Now, why does he think that it's a security, and what makes a security? Well, the way it's usually thought of in the US is the so-called Howey test. And that goes back to a case where there was a real estate investment of borrowing and lending and purchasing back and renting something out. I don't want to go into all the details of that, but basically the Supreme Court in 1946 determined what makes a security. And it says basically this: it's an investment of money in a common enterprise, so it's commonly owned by multiple parties, with a reasonable expectation of profits derived from substantial efforts of others. So those four items make a security. And if you look at many of these coin offerings, you can make a good case that they actually are securities. Right. Now, this is the position of the SEC, but there's other jurisdictions in the world with other viewpoints. So the Swiss, for instance, have put out a position paper of what they see and how they categorize tokens. So they can't differentiate between payment tokens, which they treat as money and not as a security, to utility tokens, which can pay for a particular service or application. And that makes them not a security. However, there are situations in which there also is an investment purpose, and if that is part of the issue, then they are treated as a security. So this is where it gets tricky. And then finally, there are assets tokens, which are fully treated as securities. They could be used in the pre-financing or pre-sale of an ICO. And so this is where it gets tricky. So sometimes tokens that are eventually utility tokens could be treated as an asset or as a security for a limited period of time. So it makes it really quite difficult. Now, much of what I'm going to talk to you later is the utility token, the part in the middle where it kind of gets interesting of how these tokens are being used. But asset tokens are obviously quite simple. You can clearly create a normal stock and have it traded on the blockchain, or a bond and have it traded on the blockchain. Right? So not everything that is on the blockchain is necessarily something particularly innovative. It's just you can use the existing assets. You can just use a blockchain as an infrastructure to settle if you wanted to. Now, here's some considerations for Canada. So all of this was for Switzerland for now. Now, if you want to legally run an ICO here and reach a large group and have it tradable, then you need to either abide by strict public offering rules, or you need to target accredited investors. Or you need to avoid Canadians and Americans. Good luck with that. That's quite hard to do. And you need to hope that your coin does not get classified as a security at any point in time. So this is a tall order. So it's still in a gray zone where it's not entirely clear what counts and what doesn't count. And actually just simply determining whether or not your token is a security is a very, very costly process. That costs you already tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. So what if they are securities? Now, the regulation of public securities is quite burdensome, right? So this is really expensive. And so early stage firms, they have a lot of things that they want to spend their money on, but legal is really not it, right? So, and they're really unlikely even to tick all the boxes that an IPO has to tick. So now, is this the end? Now, it's not entirely the end, and this is something that I referred to earlier. In the US and Canada, you have provisions for private firms in order to reach a particular clientele of investors there, where you don't have to have the full regulatory burden. In the US, that's Reg D, so it means these are regulations which go, for a particular type, where offerings are made for particular types of investors, and the same holds for Canada. In Canada, it means that you have to have an exempt offering memorandum that you have to create. So now, critically, you can actually restrict in a token contract who can own and transfer the tokens, right? So what you could do is you have to maintain a list of accredited investor IDs. These are the entities that can trade, or you can have this outsourced to a platform, and then you can restrict the issuance and transfer to only the suitable investors. And so now I mentioned this above there, which says a SAFT, which is a simple agreement for future tokens. It's a SAFT protocol. So these are the ones that abide by Regulation D, or which are essentially an exempt offering memorandum.